Elen Siludumanamenti Elvo. A star shines on the hour of our meeting. Hello friends, I'm Narelon on the stream. It's Sunday, isn't it? Which is painting day. That's what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be painting. Because that's Sunday. And Sunday's painting day, so how could we paint on a day that wasn't Sunday? Or indeed not paint on Sunday? I'll leave that to you. We all do. I forgot to say pronouns he, him, didn't I? Sorry, I was distracted being silly about thinking about painting days and not painting. And I was coming up with all that in my head. And I forgot to. Anyway, no matter. We're fine. We're fine now, I've said it. Hi, Loomis. Hi, B-Rat. Or should I say B-Rat? So, that's such an in-joke as well. It's not even an in-joke with this channel, is it? Hi, Loomis. Hi, B-Rat. Hope you're having a good day today. Hope Sunday's treating you well. Even though there's a bank holiday here in the UK tomorrow. So, I'm not at work. I still always that weird sense in a Sunday evening, of like, oh, it's Sunday. Sunday means back to work. So it's not. It doesn't. I'm not at work tomorrow. I always do that. What is going on with this picture here? It's gone so... Look at this. Look at this. It's gone so curly. Look at that. What's going on with that? Sorry. Yeah, it's been pretty good. How are you? I'm fine, thank you. Apart from moaning, I guess, about me earlier and about it being Sunday. I mean, I can moan tomorrow if you like. I cut my hand on a bolt the other day while putting my weight rack together, and then bashed that same area repeatedly while putting the weight rack together. But that was the other day, so I can't really moan about that anymore. But otherwise, I'm alright, thank you. Yeah, I've been a bit tired today. I slept weird. Well, not that bad, but just weird. But otherwise, no, I'm not going to moan. I'm alright, thank you. Doing alright. It's been under 35 degrees C today, so that's been a blessing. But we might get more storms and floods next week. Oh, grief. I mean, it's good that it's under 35. I can't imagine that, really. Like, it's rare that we get anywhere near that. Like, when Loomis starts moaning, it's because the temperature's like 20. So, 35 is a horrendous thing. Well, not last year we had those 40 for 2 days. And we have had times where it's gone up around 30 quite a bit, but not this year. Been nowhere near this year. I think it's topped out at like 25. So yeah, that sounds horrible. And yeah, more storms and floods, just, yeesh. You've had it bad enough with other, haven't you? I slept oddly well, only 6 hours, but I got up at 7 a.m. and didn't feel tired. Oh, that's great. That's really good. Because there's a quality of sleep, isn't there, that I don't always know. I don't think we always recognise what it is. Like, sometimes you can sleep like 6 hours and feel like the most refreshed ever. Other times you can sleep like 8 or 9 and feel shattered. Like, there's stuff going on there in the about which you go into like your REM sleep and all that. I guess there must be science to be able to work it out, but I don't know what it is. Anyway, we're doing tanks, aren't we? I didn't actually mean to put the turret on backwards. I was just like moving it earlier because I was like working it out. And I didn't want to drop my weights on it because that would be disastrous. And when I picked it up, I put the turret on backwards. And just as a note, and you wouldn't have to do it with this one. But you ever see tanks like being transported? They always transport them with the turret backwards. It's because the gun on modern tanks is absolutely... I mean, this has got a machine gun, so... But the turrets on the guns on modern tanks are absolutely massive. So you have to reverse them over the engine deck, so that they don't like poke into everything when they're travelling around. Also, as an aside, if you ever drive in a tank, I don't know why you would be, but if you ever drive in a tank and you need to drive it through a wall or a building, reverse the turret first. Because then you're not going to damage your gun as you drive through a wall. That's weird. Which bit? Reversing the turret or me moving the tank so I don't crush it with my weights? Because like both of those could potentially be weird. Or me giving advice on what to do in the event that you drive a tank through a wall. Think about the engine and keeping the turret turned back. Yeah. I mean, it's not on this one because this is an APC essentially. But on most tanks, the engine deck here at the back is much longer than the front bit at the front. The bit at the front is normally quite steeply sharped and quite small. So it probably would be like this kind of size. But then the engine deck would normally be longer. So that, yeah, reverse the gun over the back. Like another thing that historical tanks had a problem with because their guns tend to be quite small. Didn't know it's called the engine deck. Yeah, the engine deck is the flat bit over the engine. So in this tank, that's the engine deck. That bit there at the back. Yeah, it's all about how many of the roughly 20-minute sleep cycles you completed. If your sleep is very fitful, you might be asleep a long time without successfully completing sleep cycles and wake up still tired. Oh, that's interesting. Thank you, Loomis. I thought if anyone would know, it would be Loomis. Loomis has reason to know a lot about sleep, so... thank you for that, Loomis. That's really useful. Thank you. Actually, I'm going to get back up again to get paint out. I don't actually know what I'm going to do next. And I chafed up paint off it exhaust last week. Oh yeah, first of all, I need to re-undercoat some parts of it, so I'm going to do that bit first. Yeah, it's the engine deck is the bit that goes over the back of the tank. And remember, the tank is called the hull. The body of the tank is called the hull in English. I don't know what it's called in other languages. Because the Royal Navy were originally involved quite a bit in the design and construction of the first tanks. So that's why tanks in English use a lot of nautical language. Like the front of the tank is technically the bow. The body of it is the hull, etc. I think because I finally found a game that captured my attention. I've played it basically all yesterday and today. The game being Oxygen Not Included. I've heard of that, but I've never played it. Would you recommend it? I mean, I guess you would recommend it because you've been playing it that much. But yeah, I don't know anything about it, honestly. It's one of those games I like see advertised or see people talking about, but I've no idea where it is. And I daren't ask. I daren't admit that I don't know. Until now. Because on a stream you can be like, oh yeah, I know what it is. But for the purpose of my viewers, why don't you tell us what it is? If you're into like colony sim type games, yeah, it's a platformer side view perspective. Oh, it's kind of like Terraria, isn't it? I've not played Terraria either. I hear it's good though. Yeah, but more buildy, less RPG. See, that sounds fun. I could totally do that. For some reason, I just thought... I don't know. For some reason, I just thought, Don't Starve. I could never get into that. Well, that's a game that I thought I would like, and I just couldn't get into it. But I might have to give that... I say give that a try. Is it on sale? I might play... I'm always like trying games when they're on sale, aren't they? I know. I do like that detail, by the way. I don't know whether you can see it. Not like it's painted black anyway. But that whole block at the back of the heavy bolter is just racks after racks of ammunition. I really like that. And I guess if the sponsons turned inwards like that, I wonder if you could reload it from inside the tank. Probably not. A lot of people give the Deimos pattern Predators a load of stick because their heavy bolters have got drum magazines mounted on the outside. I thought, yeah, that's not a real world, like an effective real world thing. You'd want belts go into the inside of the tank, but also it's like 40k, so like, I don't expect it to work properly or be wise. And these have got it all in like box magazines on the side. So yeah, these would also require you to like reload them from the outside. Oh, it's by the same studio as Don't Starve, but it's more about automation and less about manually harvesting a ton of random junk. So it has that clay hand-drawn look. That's why whenever I see what's happened there. Whenever I've seen like it advertised or the like the artwork or whatever, that's why it's jangled in my mind. Thank you. I always wanted to play like RimWorld, maybe Factorio, but they were never cheap enough for me to buy them when I was looking for a new game, and I'm not really looking at a minute. That being said, please give me recommendations. I don't mean it like that. You know, like when you're in a mood to buy games, they were never on sale, and then maybe they've been on sale when I haven't been in a mood to buy games. I don't know. But yeah, it's like a minute. I'm really into me painting and such. So I'm not gaming a lot at the minute. Like, I never finished Subnautica. Like, I played Subnautica loads. And then I kind of knew what I needed to do next, bro. I'm not going to say it were a chore. But it was one of them that were going to be quite intense. Take a lot of time and that. So I just never did it. Also, I'm still supposed to be playing Dwarf Fortress, aren't I? Dwarf Fortress, excuse me. I've still not done that yet, neither. I spend so much time just screwing around in Subnautica. Yeah, that's what I was basically doing. Like, I did a load of just, like, dicking about. And then I knew where I needed to go, roughly. To, like, carry on the plot. And, I just never did. Because I got right into my painting. I'll wait and see if Lewis is still here. And now I've never done the dwarf one. At least nobody's waiting on me. Somebody was waiting on me. That'd be worse, right? Oh, yeah. I kind of want to try Sub-Zero to see how it plays, or whatever it's called, Below Zero. Below Zero, yeah. I've gone both. I mean, technically I'm waiting on you. That's true. Because there's only two of us. But like, I mean, that's there's like another chain, you know. But yes, I should totally do that. I think it's just like it's my turn next. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm terrible. Like if I'm into something, I have to kind of do it then. Because otherwise, I get ratty and feel like I'm forced. For some reason, I've just not vibed with it, which I should have done. I'm sorry. I need to get into a mood for it, and then I want to do it. So, what else do we need to do? When there's more metal work around the guns, but I've just I've just re-undercoated that, so that's got to wait a minute. Can I remember how I paint Space Marine guns? Because I should probably paint the guns on this the same as I paint them on my normal armies. There we go. I forgot it did that. I forgot it pivoted. Forgot the guns pivoted. Alright, so got a little bit of gold work to do. It's a matter of painting silver, well, gunmetal I guess, on the ammunition and places like that. I need to decide how I'm going to paint these. Oh, I think I know. Got it. I've got it. But that's true, I should stop letting you down, Lewis, and keep you waiting. I did realise recently, I'm not, sorry, right, in the like the Warhammer hobby, there's a term hobby butterfly, which is somebody who like flits from one thing to another, like constantly. And I wouldn't say, I'm definitely known people who are like that, by the way. And like, I'm not saying that's a judgment. If that's how you enjoy the hobby, fair enough. But I'm not quite like that. But at the same time, I'm not one of those people who just sticks with a thing forever. Like, you'll sometimes see like an interview or something with somebody who's got like 50,000 points of, I don't know, Chaos Space Marines. Like, they started collecting, I don't know, Iron Warriors in 1992. If Iron Warriors existed in 92. And they've just collected them since. Like that's you know that's all they do, and they've got, you know, hundreds and hundreds of Chaos Space Marines and dozens of tanks. And of course, like, if you collect them for long enough, you end up with different like editions of the same thing, but also just like loads of the same unit, right? Like, and I'm not quite like that either. I kind of have to. I go through. I'm not like flitting from one to another, but like, I see things that, you know, I'll be like, I'm into this at the moment, and then a bit later I'll be into something else. And I've realised over the years I've got to like go where I want to do, otherwise I'm making it a chore, aren't I? And I've done that for like tournaments and stuff, where you're like, okay, we need to get these units painted. And unless I ever end up in a tournament again, I don't want to do that no more. So I'm trying to make sure I do like what I'm into, even if I've got stuff where I think, oh, I should really finish that. And now I'm going where I get stuff finished, right? But also go with what I'm in mood for a minute. I enjoyed Per Aspera. You play as an AI satellite in Mars orbit, controlling a drone population to terraform Mars in preparation for human arrival. Oh, that sounds really fun. That's a neat idea too. Unfortunately, or fortunately, my main hobby has always been programming, but it's also my job. Yeah, that must be an interesting one, because like, you know, when I was showing a colleague, because she wanted to see photos of my Imperial Knight, they're in the Creativity channel in our Discord, by the way, if you're interested. Shouldn't take much scrolling up to find them. They, another colleague were looking over, and of course they did the thing. I mean, one of them's like a lot younger than me, other one's like 45. And they were both, oh yeah, you know, what would that be like if you could sell it? Like, how much would you get for that? I was like, well, I could probably get, you know, a few £100 for it, but like, I'm not doing it to sell. Like, I'm not doing it for a job. I don't want to do it as a job. I do it because I like it. I feel like if it were a job, it'd kind of spoil it for me. And like when you're a kid, you always think, don't you? Oh, I want to get a job that's like a hobby. I wish I could be a games tester for a job or something. So I don't know like how it would actually, you know, if that was like what I had to do, would I want to do it? Because obviously just like selling the stuff I do for fun isn't the thing, and that's not what B-Rat's mentioning either. But like, would the thing I enjoy most being a job be a good idea or not? Like, would I like that? I don't know. Because on the one hand, I think it'd be brilliant to like this be like the, you know, somehow involved with painting, you know. That'd be great, but would it kind of spoil it for me? I honestly don't know. I have wanted to like work at Games Workshop before. I have applied for a couple of jobs. Never got them, mind you. There's a kind of a thing with GW is that a lot of people go, oh wow, I can't believe they pay so little. And I look at it and go, that's a decent wage though. I'm still going to say the thing of they can afford to pay the staff more and they should, because they're a company and they're rich. You just don't get the same levels of pay disparity that you get in a lot of other companies. Still a big company though, and they can still pay their staff better and should. They're trading on the fact that people like the stuff, right? They're trading on the, you know, people want to do this for a living, so they'll take a bit or pay less to enjoy the job more. Excuse me. Yeah, that's why I don't usually tell other programmers about my hobby projects. Often the response is how to monetize, sell it. That's such a big problem. It's such a capitalist thing as well, isn't it? Like such a like capital brain. I know we've talked about it, like Kira Chats has talked about it a lot on her streams. But it absolutely is that like everything has to have a value. And I know it's always like well meant as well, right? Like people mean it well, you know, like, oh, you're good at that, you can make some money off it in our system, but it's just not nice to have everything reduced to like monetary value. And that kind of sucks, honestly. As an aside, I'm also not necessarily good in terms of painting for like a professional level. Like I was so thrilled with that night. I was so happy with how it came out. I still think it's like the best model I've ever painted. Like no doubt for me. But that don't mean it's the sort of thing that people would like pay for. Like a professional model painter would probably do a way better job and far quicker and all, because I'm slow as you can tell if you watch my streams. I mean, obviously I'm slower on stream, right? Because I'm focusing on chat. I'll stop to talk to people, etc. I'll stop trying to think. It's a different workflow to when you're doing it off stream. But I'm slow off stream and all. I've been thinking about hobby/art projects a lot lately, and I happened upon a wonderful paragraph in a book the other week. So might be right. I'm not surprised you've happened across a paragraph in a book. This is comparable to the situation of the work of art in prehistoric times, when, by the absolute emphasis on its cult value, it was, first and foremost, an instrument of magic. The work of art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, 1936. That's interesting. This is comparable to the situation of the work of art in prehistoric times, when by the absolute emphasis on its cult value, it was first and foremost an instrument of magic. Art as magic is a cool idea. That is really cool. I know there's because that used to be the prevailing view for a long time, by the way. And certainly a lot of art has that magical value. I also like the idea that it used to always be, like, all of it be assumed to be magical. And we're increasingly now thinking that some of it was magical and some of it were just like people dicking about. like the drawings of women with like really big boobs that you get in like some prehistoric art. Probably had a like fertility ritual aspect, but some of it may just be like prehistoric porn. Like just some dude thousands of years ago being like, I really like big boobs. And just drawing a woman with big boobs. Similarly, the paintings of dudes with huge dicks could also be part ritual, part just yeah. The book talks at that point about cult versus exhibition value, or personal versus public value. I guess you could sort of compare it to, but it's not an exact comparison. See, that stuff's really interesting, and the way. As much as I'm saying, maybe some of it's just people dicking about, the way like the perception of art has changed is really interesting. Like cavemen didn't draw animals and gods on walls because they wanted to show all the other cavemen in the world, but because it held personal importance to them. Yes, absolutely. This is something done for you and your immediate surroundings, right? The people who surround you, your family, your group. Maybe just you. I always wonder what that. And where's the remarkable thing? Is some of it is obviously highly symbolic, right? But a lot of it is essentially photoreal. It's like almost photorealistic. It's very, very realistic art, and I find that fascinating. Because we have this tendency to say, people in the past didn't know how to draw or whatever. But they obviously did and could do it. Like very, very realistically. Which is something that I've talked about before on stream, of the idea that sometimes when we look at, say, medieval art, it can look really goofy, and some of it's probably down to the person who was, who the best painter in that region may not be a good painter, right? Or the person who's best at painting and has the opportunity to do it, which is really, really a important thing to stress, might not have been that good, because opportunity is a really important thing. There's so much talent gets kind of like wasted, as it were, because of capitalism and similar systems, feudalism, whatever, because people just don't get the chance to pursue it. Which is such a shame. I always think that's such a shame. But otherwise there's a heavy element of style. Very often drawings have some degree of style, like drawings, paintings, whatever, have some degree of stylistic element to them, which we might mistake as a modern audience for not knowing how to draw it. I've had people suggest I publish things I make even if I don't plan on monetizing it, and that also often upsets me in some sense, and not because I thought my work was shit, but it didn't feel like it was made for that purpose. And this book really put some clarity to my feelings. Yeah, I can absolutely understand that, because it's, in some ways, it's for you, isn't it? Or just to show to who you want to. So it's not even the capitalist thing, like you say. It's the intended audience almost. And I can completely understand that. Yeah. I thought of a comparison there, but that's not really the right thing. I mean, it is, but it's a bit weird to explain, so I'll leave that one. Like, there are, again, like we talked about before, fighting that urge to constantly monetize everything. And I think if you wanted to, like, if it's something like, I don't know, I've worked on and off for years the rules for a role-playing game. Like a generic rule set that could be, used for any setting, and it's rules light. It fits all my kind of ideas of games design. And, I'd love to get it finished. And I don't think that'd be my job, ever. I'm not doing, but I wouldn't mind. Like, if I put it online and people give me some money for it, that'd be fine. To me, that's, like, different than, like, monetizing your hobby as such. Because that's just, like, a work I've created that I'd be glad to, like, share with the world. And if I get some money back for it, I might send a model with it. But, by the same token, there's other stuff that, like, settings I've written even, or ideas I've got, that I wouldn't necessarily want to put up online, even for free. Like you say, there's like different degrees of it, isn't there? I had a discussion with Gwen the other week in Kira Chat's Discord. We were talking about world building. And she ran about world building for the art of it, just for the sake of world building, as a way of, like, putting your thoughts together. And I thought that were interesting, because I always saw it as like a means to an end. Like, you world build to set a game in or whatever. The idea of doing it just as a thing was actually really interesting, I thought. Yeah, I love world building for the hell of it and writing little bits of lore. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think for me, it's like, gives me a focus to imagine, even if I'm never going to actually run that game. Like, even if it's not a role-playing game I'm ever going to run. It kind of gives me a focus. It's a bit like when I paint models. Some people just, like, paint wherever they want. They're like, well, I like this model, so I'm going to buy it and paint it or whatever. Whereas for me, I always have to do it as though I were doing it for an army or, like, a project. Well, that's always how I approach it. Like, even if it's a game I'm probably never going to play, I always do it, and this, like, that gives me my structure, to be like, well, theoretically I could play a game of 40k with this. I might never do, but it's like it gives me the structure to work on it, I guess. Which is, I suppose it's like a framing device that my brain needs or likes. It's more of this idea is taking up space in my head, so I better write it down feeling to me. Yeah, I've had that as well about other things, like little story ideas. Very often, when I've got, like, an idea in my head, I just talk about it on stream, and that, like, gets it out for me. That's why sometimes it'd be some random thing I'll come out with. And it's because that's what's, like, going around in my head. Like, putting it out into the world, like, kind of, like, does that, that finishes it for me. I've scratched so much pain off this. Yeah. I sometimes find when I'm like organising my thoughts on something, I'll say them out loud as though almost as though I were like on stream or giving a talk or something, and that just like organises my thoughts for me. Oop. I suppose it's easier to do because I live on my own. It's not like talking to myself, you know. It's almost like and sometimes I will then go and talk about it on stream. And it's almost like a rehearsed thing then, isn't it? Which may be a bit weird to say out loud, but there we are. I like that there are skulls on the air intakes. Like, that's so unnecessary. Like, why are there skulls on the air intakes? They just don't make sense. I love stuff like that when it comes to 40k. Like, it's just needless. Like, why would you do that? I always think the Sisters of Battle, like the Adepta Sororitas even, are like peak 40k for me. Because they're armoured, like the devout warrior monks in warrior nuns, in power armour with really good weapons and everything. And it's all really, like, it's not very practical. They're wearing boob plate. Their armour isn't the most practically designed. Some elements have. Some elements are quite practical, but they're always a bit over the top. But then when you look at the tanks, because they use Rhino chassis vehicles as well, but like they've got little alcoves with statues in, and they've turned the top of the exhaust stacks into braziers, and there's decoration everywhere, and it's so unnecessary. To the point that it would be like a drawback to have that on your tank, or on your armour or whatever. And I just think it's just perfect. It's like that's proper 40k. Like sacrificing practicality for your over the top decorations is exactly 40k. Just your average Imperial skull decoration. Wait a minute. Wait a second. Hands. Are we the baddies? It's covered in skulls, don't worry about it. Obviously it's to scare away bad spirits so they don't get into the intakes. Must be. To be honest, I would accept that. Like if someone's like, oh yeah, the Imperium put someone there to keep away evil, like bad spirits. Like, sure, I believe it. Yeah. Like superstition and just. Thanks for the lurk, Frezzo. Hope you're having a good day today. One thing I always think is, like when you hear people talk about the Imperium, oh, they're not the bad guys, they're like this. It's like, okay, like I get all kinds of arguments, but like Space Marines will go into battle chanting "cleanse, purge, kill," and you're trying to tell me that those are the good guys? Because the obvious answer is 40k doesn't have good guys, but you're telling me that the people who are going to battle chanting "cleanse, purge, kill" are not villains? That doesn't seem like a very like heroic thing to be doing, does it? Yeah. I always like that you get that nice comparison with the Chaos Space Marines, who will chant "kill, maim, burn," which is not far off "cleanse, purge, kill," is it? Like if you tell me, one of these is the villain, I honestly won't be able to know which it were. Is it the people chanting "cleanse, purge, kill" or "kill, maim, burn"? Even by the standings of the... hey, Porcelain, how's it going? Thank you Good. Are you having a good day today? Even by the standards of the setting, they're not one of the better factions. Yeah, absolutely. They stumbled over my words. I was trying to catch a chat. But yeah, like the Imperium, they're not good guys by any metric, are they? And like that's a fun thing for a war game, right? Because it's a nice kind of like setting. It's a bit like Judge Dredd, which is inspired by Judge Dredd, or like the film Starship Troopers, where kind of having everything be awful, everyone be a villain or whatever. Like that works. That's the it's a good way of like providing satire by pitching it as though it's good or normal. In fact, Paul Verhoeven, when he was making Starship Troopers, the film, said he deliberately made everything on Earth seem quite nice, because if he'd made it horrible, people would just kind of dismiss it and be like, oh yeah, that's just a horrible scenario, that's not us. But by making it seem nice, people kind of accept it on its premise, and then you kind of look into it as a criticism. I was like, I can see that, yeah. That it makes it more like real to people, in the sense of if you have it like a horrifying dystopia, people go, well, that'll never happen here. But if you make it look nice, well, they have the most uselessly ornate style, though, so there's that. That's true. That says a lot, I think. Because, see, I do like uselessly ornate, so maybe there's a reason I'm painting an Imperial vehicle right now. I actually really like, I've said it before, I really like the Imperial vehicles. Like the whole, like, Imperium style is so good. If I had the time and money as well, but most of the time, I would probably collect Sisters of Battle, because they are so, like, uselessly ornate. I love that, like, design aesthetic so much. Like that. You can see it from there. That winged blood drop. Like, what's the point in that? But just on the gun mantlet. Is it a gun mantlet if it's mounted over a pair of, like, a giant machine gun? I guess it is. I think it's still the mantlet on the tank's main gun, right? I guess it's still a mantlet. Sorry, I'm focusing a minute. Like, because it's only a first stage, it doesn't really matter if you're too neat or not, because you're going to be painting all the layers around it. You can neaten up as you go. But I also want to make sure that I've kind of got everything covered before I move on to the next stage of shading it. Like, I'm going to have to neaten this up anyway. But I want to get that good coverage first. And of course, we've talked about before, you don't want to do one thick layer, you want to do a few thin ones, because that means you obscure less of your detail. You don't want to be obscuring your detail. Oop. Watched a couple of films over the past couple of days. Well, yesterday, actually. I watched 2 films yesterday. I'll say over the past couple of days. No, but yesterday. I rewatched Dune from 21, which I really like. That is a really good film. It's a really good adaptation of Dune as well. Obviously, your mileage may vary. I have to say quickly, I don't think Loomis has seen it yet, but they'll probably have different opinions to me on films, as he does. But I really liked it. I mean, obviously the sound design, which is very good, but also just like in general, it's just like, it's got such a grandiose kind of feel. Like, The slow pacing, the wide shots, it gives it this stately feel, which I really, really like. And I think it's exactly what you need in Dune. And the costume design as well. The Ornithopter, yeah. It looks really good, it looks really stylish, but it looks like it'd work and all. And I really like that, because to have something that actually looks like it would work, and it sounds so, yeah, all the sound, yeah, definitely. I should actually thank Porcelain if she's still here, because she streamed it in Kirichat's Discord, and it was like one of the first things I ever watched in there. And I remember Porcelain atted me at the time. It was the second thing I ever watched in there, and Porcelain atted me at the time because I'd said I really wanted to see it, and was like, "Would you like, are you available tonight? Because we're going to screen it." And I really appreciated that. As someone who was a fan of Dune as a kid, I read all of them as a kid. I think this will work. Some of these details are really small in there, and I'm like, am I kind of making a mess of this? Was that a double feature night? I think it was Blade Runner and then Dune, or am I misremembering? Ooh, I think it was Dune first. Was it Dune? It was Dune and then Blade Runner 20 whatever. Yeah, or all the way around order-wise, but yes, it was a double feature. Because that's where, by the, partway through Blade Runner, Kira was like, I can't take this anymore, it's too much for my brain. Which is fair, because they are both slow, heavy films, aren't they? Both of them have great sound design. They really do. They really do have great sound design. And great cinematography, yeah. They both have that kind of slow, paced out direction with these wide angle shots. And this incredible sound design that give them this real feeling. Sorry, Bina also said the Ornithopter sounds like you'd feel it in your chest when flying it. Yes, absolutely. Really good, really well done on that. What I'm doing, if you don't know, is I'm picking out the shell casings in the ammunition racks on the Baal Predator. My general thing of painting armoured vehicles is I like them buttoned up, as the terminology is. But I wanted that open because it's got nice detail in it, and I felt guilty covering it all up. So it's one hatch down and one up. Villeneuve did both, I think, so it's not surprising. Yeah, that's very much his style, isn't it? I need to rewatch Arrival for the 5th time or something. I think I've seen that twice. I've seen it twice. But that is really good. That's another of those it's like an intense film, isn't it? It's one of them where you kind of left at the end of it. You're not over the moon. You're just kind of yeah. Have you ever used parafilm for making? I remember watching a really cool video of someone using that for painting models. I've never used that. No, I'll have to check it out. I go through phases of... Oh, I made a hack of that. I can correct it later. I kind of go through phases of wanting to try out everything new and new techniques and do things differently, and then retracting into what I know and be no, I'll just do it this way because it's easy. But in the minute, I'm going to try new things out, so I'll have to look that up. Thank you. Loomis says, and I did kind of know this was coming, I've kind of checked out on adaptations. I'd rather made something new instead of adapting a work into a medium it was never intended for. Yeah, I mean, I can completely understand that. I think they've done a really good job of adapting Dune. But I also understand how Loomis has a thing about adaptations in general, right? Which is why I joked about adding in your mileage may vary when I was talking about Dune. Because of Loomis. I'm contractually required to have an objection of some kind. Okay, that's true. That is true. there is only one stated exception to Loomis and films, which is, of course, is Pacific Rim. That's the only film that Loomis doesn't have to have an objection about. I'll see if I can find that video and link it in Discord. Thank you, Porcelain. That'd be interesting. I'd like to see that. Honestly, I think they did a good job of the Dune movie. Even the voice was pretty well used, especially from Paul's perspective when it was used on him. Yes, I was really impressed, actually. I absolutely, I say we've talked about the sound design, but included in that, like the use of music, the different music that's used in Dune, that's now, I can't remember the terminology, so maybe you can. There's a term for when music in a film is, or like a teleprogram or whatever, is actually in the film itself. It's not a soundtrack. It's actually being used in the film. And there's a couple of examples of that I think are really, really well done, where it kind of blends the music that's in the film. Diegetic, yes, yeah, that's it. I think that what they do really cleverly, or Villeneuve, whoever does really cleverly, is blending the diegetic music with the soundtrack. And like it'll shift from one into the other or combine the two. And I think that's so clever. And it's really evocative and works really, really well. I'm obviously thinking about the Atreides music. I think the first one I saw him do that with, and forgive me for evoking this film, was in Zulu. When they do people singing that then becomes the soundtrack, like polished up recorded version. I think they do it in Hunt for Red October as well, don't they? Yeah, they do it in Hunt for Red October. And the bit with the Sardaukar, I think also had diegetic music. I was thinking of that as well. I was using the Atreides example, but in my head I was thinking of the Sardaukar. That scene I actually saw as a clip long before I actually saw the film, and it just hooked me straight away. And I was like, yeah, that's a vision of Salusa Secunda and the Sardaukar that like just captured me. And based sort of on something, not based directly on what Frank Herbert said, but based on the kind of things he talked about with the Sardaukar. But also, yeah, I'm not saying all adaptations are bad, but it's a natural extension of my pre-existing I am tired of remakes policy. Yeah, absolutely, Loomis. And the use of silence, yeah, absolutely, be right. That mixture of music, diegesis, and silence is really well done. I'm really impressed. Ah, yes, Pacific Rim, the only film I've ever enjoyed. That's true. That's true. It's the only film Loomis has ever enjoyed. Or rather, let's be honest. People who don't know, this is like a long-running thing between me and Loomis about films. I'm not like not critical. Well, that's the joke. The joke is that Loomis hates all films, and I'm like love all films or whatever, which is not strictly true. But I'm a bit more willing to like let it flow over me a little bit. So there might be problems or things I don't like, but I'll tend to be a bit more like, it's fine. Whereas Loomis doesn't like films as much, prefers the more interactive medium like video games. So therefore is that kind of stuff that I might go, it's fine, especially if I'm painting. If I'm painting while I'm watching a film, there can be bad stuff in there, I'm like, whatever. Whereas obviously Loomis is a bit more critical, which is entirely fair, and I'm not. Like, we joke about it, I'm not actually criticising Loomis for it. So the joke is that Pacific Rim is the only film that Loomis has ever enjoyed. The only film that Z doesn't really moan about, I guess. But yeah, that bit with the Sardaukar, like yeah. And if you're interested, Frank Herbert talked about how one of the things you would do to get like an uber effective kind of like fighting force would be you set him apart from society and tell them that they were set apart from society and give them their own rituals and ways of being. And so some people criticised the film's depiction of the Sardaukar for having rituals when, they're not explicitly described as having rituals in the book. But Frank Herbert actually said, wait a minute. Sorry, I just noticed my camera's misaligned. But Frank Herbert actually said, hold on, steady, and then it's more like that, isn't it? Something of this nature. There we go. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. Where Frank Herbert's mentioned the idea that you'd give them those rituals. There we go. Sorry, I messed around with cables and monitors the other day and made a right mess. And now everything's not lined up how I wanted it to be. But yeah, so it fits. Like it's kind of like when you go to adapt a book, you kind of sometimes have to go with sort of what the author said, not necessarily explicitly what's in the text, because you're adapting. It's not a straight one for one. When people do straight one for ones, they tend to be rubbish. I've done a 180 on adaptations the last few years, and I kind of prefer if they change some elements up sometimes now, which is great because Foundation changed so much from the books, but I also like most of what they added. And someone says, this I agree with. Once upon a time I hated every change, but these days I think doing it different is the only reason to make it in the first place. Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with that. You're not making like the author's work, are you? Right? You are doing your own version of it, so I think you can be like true to the spirit of it while making changes that work. Because if you try and do like I was just saying, you try and do a straight adaptation. First of all, you just the same thing. Like if you do a remake, change some stuff. If you're doing a remake, because there are remakes where they've made it literally like shot for shot the same as the original. Well, what's the point in that? If you're going to do a remake, you've got to change some stuff, put your stamp on it, do it how you would, and then it makes it worth watching. It's kind of like the people who made the Darkest Dungeon game said, or is it Red Hook Studios? Where they said that they wanted the second game to play very differently to the first, so that you had a reason to play both. And it wasn't just like the second game is a better version of the first. You want a reason to play both, and I think that's true with adaptations as well, and remakes and stuff. For example, the Neon Genesis Evangelion anime was redone as a series of films recently, and the plot is unrecognisable from halfway through, and it's a really good experimentation of a different timeline. Yeah, I like stuff like that. Like, I do like film versions of books, if they're done well. And I think actually, and I've kind of talked about this before a little bit, and thank you, Porcelain. I saw that ad. One of the things I think about Lord of the Rings films is there's some stuff that Peter Jackson changes that I can't stand. I think it's a really bad idea. I wish he hadn't changed it. But there's other stuff where actually the changes kind of enhances it. It's showing stuff in a film way that that essentially is in the books. I explained that really badly. Let me try again. I'll give you an example. You know, in the film, Aragorn has a fall from his horse, doesn't he, and falls over that cliff. Well, not fall from his horse, he's off his horse. And he gets dragged over that cliff. And he, recovers. And you get this image of, Arwen, talking to him. And he kind of comes round after that, and, recovers after she, talks in his head somehow. And it's never really explained. But that's actually in the book, not specifically that incident. Aragorn never falls over a cliff or gets injured or whatever like that in the books. But the books do tell us that wherever Aragorn went, Arwen kept her thoughts with him and on him, protecting him and helping him. And that adding that scene in is actually a way to show Arwen, keeping her, using her sort of elven magic, if you like, to help protect Aragorn through his journeys and his travails. And I think that's a clever use of adaptation. It's not a scene that's in the book, but it don't matter because it's showing stuff that is. That's good. That's a good way of adapting things. And if we want to keep using the Lord of the Rings films as an example, the change in Gimli's characterization between the book and the film is a really bad example of how to adapt something. Because they turn this thoughtful, poetic character into a clown. And I hate that. And I've always theorised that because Gimli is a dwarf, they make him funny because people like to laugh at people of short stature, I think. And New Zealand and Australia, until recently, used to have a lot of humour directed, and it's referenced even with Gimli. They reference the so-called dwarf toss-in, don't they? Which was considered a hilarious thing to do in Australia and New Zealand until shockingly recently, really. So I don't like that change at all. Okay, final link to Parafilm video in Discord. Thank you, Porcelain. I'll have a look at that later. Arwen was barely in the movies. Yeah, I mean, you can argue she's actually in them slightly more than the book. Well, she is in them more than the books. But the book gives this description of how she protected Aragorn with her powers when he wasn't around. So she doesn't act much, but like her influence is there, and I think adding that scene kind of shows the influence. But one thing I will say, and I am a Tolkien fan, as you might guess, from all of the Tolkien references. But yeah, Tolkien never wrote many women, did he? Things like women are really important in his stories, but there's just like hardly ever any female characters, and they barely appear. And I mean, depends. Obviously, in Beren and Luthien, the story of Beren and Luthien in its various forms. Luthien's in it a lot. But as a general rule, Tolkien like barely included women, and that's a real shame. I mean, there's other stuff I'd change about Tolkien too, but yeah, that's if I could. Well, the role of Galadriel in the films is much smaller than it is in the books as well. But we only kind of like hear about, like with Arwen stuff, we sort of hear about it rather than seeing it, 'cause it's not the focus of the main part of the story, which I get, but still, you know. Would be nice to see. If you're doing an adaptation, you can show that stuff on screen. So let's see it. The Hunger Games was a good adaptation too. I was wondering how they'd handle the fact that the books are very in the lead's head, written in first person with lots of long segments of thought. This is one of those split thoughts, so there'll be more of this to come. And the way they did it was to not have those inner thoughts and instead use the time to show other scenes and events that we didn't see in the book because the viewpoint character wasn't there. Yeah, that is really good. And that's what I like. Well, what I thought was there was room to really do well in The Hobbit. Because a lot of people said, well, The Hobbit should have just been a single film. And I very much disagree with that. I think The Hobbit should have been 2 films, probably. And it's because there's more in the Hobbit book than you could adapt into a single film. But there's probably not enough for 3. But the Lord of the Rings and the appendices and that have all this stuff. They explain both the book and kind of the appendices. Explain this stuff that was happening during the events of the Hobbit. And so you've got space in an adaptation to include that. Which they kind of do. They do it. They just do it in a weird way that I don't like. But you've got space, like Loomis is saying about the Hunger Games, the stuff the main character didn't see. You've got stuff to show the audience, to fit that narrative together. And of course, remember, for Tolkien, the stuff that like Gandalf was doing came later. He just needed a reason to get Gandalf out of the plot. And it was only later when he put in some references and stuff, but basically later on, that he fitted it all together and was like, oh yeah, that's what Gandalf was doing. So with the film and it essentially acting in hindsight, you've got a chance to put that in. Which they did, but again, they did it in like a cockeyed way. I'm not sure why they did it the way they did. But also adding in stuff that you didn't need to add in. Like that weird romance plot, you don't need it. It went wide rather than deep. This is the Hunger Games. And the end result is something that complements the books really well. Yeah. Yeah, I believe that. I've not read the books. I've seen the films, though. I liked them. I think it was ages before I saw the last one, you know. Like, I watched most of the Hunger Games films and didn't see the last one for absolutely ages. But I have seen it. I thought it was good. Can't necessarily remember everything about it, but I enjoyed it. I need to find out some of my Space Marines actually, and see how I painted guns. Because I wanted to match how I painted the guns in my Space Marines. Because this is a Space Marine vehicle. Now, one thing I did do, because this is a whole point of contention online. I don't know if you can see it. Probably can't. You can't actually, because the... Oh, kind of a little bit. If I hold it... See the barrels on the stone bolter? I did drill them out. There's a whole dispute online. Let me paint them for a little bit more and see if that shows up better. Yeah, you can see it from there, look. On this one. I drilled out the barrels. There's a whole thing about... Some people take it as a moral thing, you must drill out the barrels on your guns. Whereas others are it don't matter. And others are no, you must. Because I don't know if you're ever aware of this, but sometimes nerds will get really obsessive about minor details. I don't know if you're ever aware of that. That's the thing that happens sometimes. I also drilled out the barrels on the storm, or the heavy bolters at the side of the tank. Say the other films the other film I watched this week, by which I mean yesterday. Dunkirk. I've watched it before. I watched it with my mum and dad a while ago. I really like it. I'm not a Christopher Nolan fan, but I really like Dunkirk. I think it's really well done. Tom Hardy's very good in it, as you might expect. And I don't think most actors would take a role where you only see the main character, the character's face right at the end. It's only briefly that you see Tom Hardy's character's face. And I know I've known of actors in other roles refusing them because you couldn't see the character's face much. If you're interested, he plays a Royal Air Force pilot. So he's got his mask, because he's flying his Spitfire. So most of the film he's got his mask on. And I believe they used a real Spitfire. That's pretty cool. And but it's a very good film. It really captures that feeling of the whole film has a sense of constant dread that just never lifts. It just doesn't lift throughout the whole film. There's just this constant weight of dread, which is really well done. I mean, I'll read Loomis's comment, and then people who don't know, I'll explain what Dunkirk was. And you'll see why I think it works well in the film. My only real complaint is that when they split the third book into two films, they actually had some new stuff to make a climax to book 3, part 1, as it were. And it doesn't make much sense with the rest of the plot. Yeah. That's an unfortunate thing, yeah. But yeah, I was having this discussion yesterday in Kierchat's Discord, and I don't know how widely known the Dunkirk evacuation is outside of the UK, because it's a big deal in the UK, right? We all know about it, we learn about it at school. It's seen as this big defining moment, and you will hear people even now talk about Dunkirk spirit as this kind of vague sense of what it is to be British. But yeah, so basically when the Germans invaded France in May 1940, they'd got a plan that no one expected them to do, that even the German High Command didn't want to do. That basically involved going where you wouldn't expect anyone to go. And they did, and it worked. It could have very easily gone wrong, but it didn't. They managed to send the British and French forces the wrong way. So they had this perfect chance to stop them, but didn't, because they thought they were coming somewhere else. So they essentially got between the British and French forces. And, managed to split up the main body of the French forces and the British forces and all this. And drove for the coast to try and seize the ports. The British launched just a local counterattack that spooked the German High Command and Hitler so much that they put the advance on hold for a little bit. That gave time for British forces to A, receive reinforcements, and B, regroup at the port of Dunkirk. There to be evacuated, basically across the channel, because they knew they'd kind of already lost the war in France and needed to regroup to push on again later. And so the Dunkirk evacuation, however, was hampered by the fact that Dunkirk is not a deep water port. There's what's known as a mole, kind of like a pier, but like made of stone, right? Made of like rocks or whatever. And that was the only place they could dock ships to pick up the soldiers, which made the evacuation very, very slow. And there's also a feeling that, seeing as the war was over, the British forces, like destroyers and ships and stuff, should be withdrawn to defend the UK for when the Germans attacked, and kind of abandon the British army there. And so it was all very slow. But because they could only dock one ship at a time and all like this, the government put out a call for anyone with small boats to go across the channel and act as ferries, basically. Sometimes picking up people directly and bringing them back. Other times just pulling up to the beach, getting soldiers on, pulling out to a destroyer, waiting at anchor, offload them and so on like that. And that's what they did. And that's what the film's about. It's about that whole evacuation. And so we see it through a few viewpoint characters. And I think it's really well done. And I think it covers the different aspects of Dunkirk very well. Obviously the story, like the individual character stories, are fictionalised. But it's a really good telling of events. And constant sense of dread and tension. You don't really see the Germans. They're just a threat, a presence. You see planes and you hear gunfire, but you don't see the individual Germans. I think it's a really good idea. Because it makes them like a faceless menace. A bit like we've talked about before with Sauron in Lord of the Rings. You don't see him, but his actions are dictating the plot. It's very tense. Constant sense of dread, and shows how people are like turning on each other in panic or fear or whatever. But then also being very brave and being very selfless. So it's really good. And surprisingly moving in places. Very interesting. So I would recommend you watch it if you get a chance. It's not the sort of film where you'd be like, oh yeah, I want to keep watching that, or I want to watch it again. It's the sort of thing where you watch it and kind of like, oh, one of them. I've talked about them before, the sort of films where you watch it and you enjoy it, but afterwards you just kind of stare off into space a little bit. I would say it's one of those films. And I think I know Dunkirk and the evacuation thereof is overdone over here, because it was about turning a defeat into being able to claim it was a victory, essentially, like make a propaganda victory out of a massive defeat. That's what was going on there. But it is also really important historically, because if the British Army, because in the end, I don't spoil the film, but they were able to successfully evacuate a very large number of soldiers. And had they not been able to do so, it's quite possible that the British government would have been forced to agree to the relatively generous, really, terms that the Nazi Germany wanted for Britain to surrender, or to at least stop fighting. If there's no UK in the Second World War, the Enigma Code doesn't get broken, which is hugely important. But also, one of the main ones, the main things is, the UK was actually able to delay the Nazi German invasion of the Soviet Union for 3 months. And that delay meant they hit the very muddy season known as Rasputitsa in sort of Ukraine, Belarus, southwestern Russia, which then slowed the German army down, which slowed them down to winter, which caused them all those problems that ultimately led to the reverse. Thanks for a lot of, coupled with a lot of heavy Soviet fighting. So it hides that if Britain had not been involved, this invasion of the Soviet Union would have happened on time, would have been far worse for the Soviet Union. Maybe they still would have won it anyway. So it's actually significant. The Dunkirk evacuation is actually really significant. But I don't know how widely known outside of the UK it is. I like as well that in the film, they sometimes point out real things that happened, that if you know the history, you kind of know why they're going on. But if you don't, you don't know, the characters don't know. There's a bit where one of the British officers wonders why the Germans aren't deploying the tanks against him at Dunkirk. And another one speculates on why he thinks it might be. And he's wrong. Or wrong in part, at least. There's actually a couple of factors going on, but of course he couldn't know that at the time. And I thought that was really interesting. I do love that kind of meta storytelling. Yeah, me too. I think it's really clever to have a thing that people at the time wouldn't know, right? When those officers are like, well, why aren't they using the tanks right now? They wouldn't know that. They couldn't know what was going on in German high command in Berlin or whatever. But obviously, if you know your history or you know the events, we can and do. And I really appreciate that as a... Yeah, okay, if you know what's going on, you know it, and if you don't, you're as in the dark as them, I guess. But no, I really do like that. That's clever. It's very good for a war is hell kind of film. I do need to dig out a Space Marine to work out. I painted some of these details on the others. Is that all silver? I'll come back to that detail once I'll dig out a Space Marine. And I know where they are. I'm not doing it now. But at some point I'll dig out a Space Marine and then I can proceed with that bit. Me listening along while I build an HVAC system so my colony doesn't slowly cook itself to death. Thank you, Mira. I love the nodders so much, by the way. I know I've said it before, but I just love that emote so much. As a more fictional example that I like, a lot of the plot to Kingdom Hearts 2 doesn't make sense if you haven't played the spin-off Chain of Memories. But the main character of Kingdom Hearts 2 doesn't know about the events of Chain of Memories, so you get to experience the same genuine confusion that he has. Yeah, I really like that. I really like that, it's not quite the same meta storytelling, I guess, but depends which order you watch them in. We've talked before, and again, I'll not spoil it, but we've talked before about the events of the episode 33 of Battlestar Galactica. Because the main characters in that have got no idea what's going on. And I like that. But if you've watched, I guess if you watch the pilot, you sort of, you got a rough idea. But if you don't, like I hadn't, when I watched it, you don't know what's going on either. And Loomis has, I think, rightly said before that the pilot should come at the end of the first series. So the viewer also has no idea what's going on, like the characters don't. And that's how I watched it. As an aside, and this is just like one of my things, I really dislike the kind of the attitude that people have that the French were like cowards during the Second World War. I guess it's appropriate that we talk about military history while I paint a tank, but I really dislike that attitude because the French actually fought very, very bravely, but they simply got outmaneuvered, and there wouldn't have been a point in prolonging the war to get more of the citizens killed. Should they have surrendered? That's a different matter. Maybe, maybe not. But certainly I understand why they did, is the thing. Like, if you've been through the First World War, you don't want that again. Yeah, the pilot is good on its own merits, but the way the events of the pilot are teased out in Series 1 works even better. The pilot works better as a flashback that lets you finally see those events in person. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, Loomis sums that up really well. Like, there's some little details they tweaked into the in the pilot that aren't in the main series, but I don't think it matters. I think, yeah, absolutely. Watch it as a flashback, like they did with The Plan, which is technically you should watch that at the very end of watching all the episodes of BSG. It's a bit of a Cylon perspective. I barely remember the early episodes on miniseries of BSG. I like the miniseries. I think it's very good at creating a lot of tension. And, what's going on, and nobody knows. It's very, it's very fun, it's very good, very tense. Feels very 9/11. Very much like that. That was in, and I think it is intended to. Very much like the initial moments after the September the 11th attacks, where like no one knew what was going on and just something bad was happening and all that. I'd say, by the way, the whole series is actually very post 9/11. Actually, I don't like the way I've done that. I'm going to repaint that bit. Do you know what? Before I get back onto me Second World War thoughts, if I do, or unless you can stop me, I saw a terrible take the other day. Someone was saying that The Walking Dead is anti-immigrant fascist propaganda. And I kind of like, what? Because they said that the principle of The Walking Dead. Never seen the show. It's good. It's good. I mean, to be honest, I've not seen all of it. They stopped showing it on a channel I could get, so I think I can get it on Amazon Prime, so I'll catch up at some point. But the basic premise was that because it involves fighting people who look like you but aren't, and keeping those people out of your settlements for your own safety, that it's therefore like fascist propaganda about how you shouldn't trust people from other countries. I was like, that's certainly an interpretation. Because I don't normally like criticising people's interpretations of things, but that feels like a very great stretch. To kind of go, yeah, zombies are actually meant to be like immigrants, I guess. When is the best time to watch Razor, by the way, if you peeps have an opinion? I believe it's set at the end of Series 2, but released after Series 3. Chronological or release order? End of Series 2, I would say. Razor felt weirdly out of place as it was aired. Yeah, I would say end of Series 2. because that's like more immediate to the events that it mentions. Because it's mostly flashback anyway, so it's not like. That sounds like consensus. Thank you. Yeah, it's a weird one, Razor. Like I'm not going to spoil it or anything. I'm not saying. Yeah. I suppose it's a bit like what we're saying should have been done with the pilot. That it kind of like fills in on events that the characters didn't know about at the time. Maybe it's a bit like that. So as long as you don't watch it before series 2, I think you're probably fine. But personally, yeah, I'd watch it. I'd watch it after series 2. Let me just look up a picture of this. See if there's a picture online. Because I want to see how other people have painted this particular piece of this tank. Like, obviously I don't have to paint things as they're painted by others, but I'm just I'm kind of curious. There we are. Let me look at this picture. Yeah, it's interesting. Yes. Very interesting. Hold on. Oh, they did it like that, did they? Oh. Yeah, I can see that. Yes, of course, yes. That's going to be awkward. That part's going to be awkward to paint. You have to do it, though. That sounds like the sort of interpretations. I think this is The Walking Dead being actually a work of fascist propaganda. That sounds like the sort of interpretations that you get off of some 100-year-old work by a sixth form student picking up on themes and citing death of the author. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Like, I would never want to say, like I say, I don't really want to be like, oh, this or that interpretation, boo, kind of thing. Because some people do, and I don't really want to do that. But at the same time, some interpretations are just like very off, aren't they? If not just like straight up wrong. And then like people will go, well, death of the author. It's like, I think that was a very eloquent way of putting it, don't you? Just you all got what I mean. I could do really with a brush of intermediate size for this bit. But I want a couple of quotes around. There are definitely some interpretations where you kind of go, no, no, that's not it. It's like I talked about the other week, the one with the well-received paper where someone said that Tolkien was writing Lord of the Rings about events that actually happened 20 years after he wrote it, which is remarkable. I suppose it's similar as well to some stuff I've talked about before with certain kinds of historical or a history book that is sort of analysing the theme or idea of historical events rather than covering the events themselves, and that can come across as quite bizarre. Looks like Red Planet will be on time today. Stream is starting. I gotta go grab some food. Alright, thank you for being here, B-Route. I'll be back in a bit. I'll see you in a bit. I'll raid into Red Planet. That'll be the plan. So I'll see you there. Enjoy your snap. Oh yeah, 'cause last week it was late, wasn't it? So we had a longer stream here and then raided over when they were ready. Yeah, we'll do as normal. Like when it's when they're live, we'll go over in a bit. I've been disappointed with BSG Series 2 after how good Series 1 was. Yeah, I still think it's good. I still really like it. But I think the first series is just better. I think part of the problem is this first series is just so good that it's actually quite difficult for anything to kind of like match it or live up to it. Like the first episode, 33, is so brilliant, like straight out there, that I think it's not. Anything after that is almost downhill, you know. But yeah, I don't think it ever gets as good as Series 1 in a lot of ways. I think there is great development of characters and ideas and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of just brilliant telly, probably Series 1's the best. But then the rest of it is still really good. So, like, you know. Like the 2 episodes of BSG that are generally considered to be not that great are still really good. It's just comparative, you know. And obviously, your mileage may vary. I did have a peek at the writing credits, and the people who wrote my favourite episodes, 33 and Tie Me Down, didn't have much to do with later series, while the people who wrote my least favourite episode, Hand of God, go on to be the main writers for the rest of the series. Yeah. It can be quite divisive. There's stuff about some things where people go, nah, it's absolutely awful, and others go, nah, it's brilliant. I'm obviously in the brilliant camp, I guess. Because I really like BSG. Mind you, I say the first series is the best, it's true. But there are some moments in later series that are just... Like, I guess there are some episodes in later series that are equal to, like, anything from the first. Or greater in some cases. Like the last episode of Series 4. Which, depending on how you cut it, some people argue that it's all... Like, Series 4 and 5 are actually just Series 4. Because it was divided in 2 because of the writer's strike at the time. They decided to basically divide what they got planned for Series 5 in half and hope they got renewed after the writer's strike rather than like conclude it definitively what they got. And that episode is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I always think of that as like, what is it? It's up there with 33 for me. Like maybe you'll get to it and be like, nah. We'll have to see. In my box set, they're listed as 4 Part 1 and 4 Part 2. Yeah, the one I've got lists them as 4 and 5. So I guess they later did... They were like marketed at the time as 4 and 5. So I guess they later did decide to classify them as 4 Part 1 and 4 Part 2. So in that case, I'm talking about the end of Series 4 Part 1. In that way of numbering it. And that episode is brilliant. And there's some absolutely fantastic stuff in there. For me, I think Series 3 maybe is the worst. But again, still great telly. Like, I still love it. It's still really good. It's just like probably, for me, personally, Series 3 maybe where it's the weakest, although even that's still really good. I don't know what you think so far when it comes to the difference between Series 1 and Series 2. I do think they're right to do things slightly differently, though. I think it would be difficult for them to like keep up what they'd done in Series 1 and just leave it at that. I still think they could have done it. Yeah, you know, I'm wrong. I still think there's ways they could have done it differently or better, but I still think that I think that if they just tried to keep doing series 1 just with like different storylines, I think that could have become very stale. Because some series will do that, won't they? Where they're like, this thing works, so we'll stick to doing this thing. I think that can ruin stuff. It's just surely is trying too much. But again, your mileage may vary. And remember though, if you do have an alternative interpretation to what everybody else thinks or what the majority opinion is, remember to frame it as really obvious and how you can't understand that nobody else sees things your way. That's what you must do. Because then you get to feel intellectually superior to everybody else, which is the important thing. I think it really suffers from the telly format. Do you mean in like the nature of making telly? Because I think it does suffer from the nature of making telly. Or do you mean in like the fact that it's kind of like it's not episodic, it's serialized, but I think it'd be better as like a film or something. Films. It's trying to tell an overarching story set in a format that has to be episodic. Yeah, I think it does very well at being serial, like serialized, as it were. But yeah, absolutely, I get that. BSG is one of those things as well where its success has made more programs. It made it possible to make programs like it, but it would actually benefit most from having been made now. If that makes sense. Like if BSG was made now, they'd be able to do things in different ways. Better, I think, in some ways. But part of that is because of the success of BSG. Like, I've got a bit more paint left there, actually. Too many problems that are only introduced at the beginning of an episode and are solved by the end, when they're supposed to be things that have sucked all along and will continue to suck. Yeah, they have to kind of like imply, don't they? It's like a crisis of the week almost, isn't it? So they'll kind of say that this is a problem that needs solving now because it's become a big deal we've got to deal with. But it's I jinxed it. They're running a few minutes behind due to technical issues. We'll carry on then. We'll carry on until they're ready. We keep us informed, B-Rat. I know you're mad there, so if you don't mind doing that, that's what we'll do. It kind of turned into Voyager, the exact kind of thing they were trying to avoid. Yeah, I don't think it's ever as I don't think it's got the same problems as Voyager, but I see exactly what you mean. I can see the similar kind of issues there. What I think they do quite well very often is sort of imply that this is a problem that's been going on, but now it's become an issue that needs to be tackled. Like things have reached a head. And I think that works partly because of the nature of people, right? We tend to leave things until we can't avoid dealing with them. But also the nature of BSG, they're constantly struggling against problems, right? Bad things are happening all the time. Things are constantly going wrong. Things are breaking down. So they're constantly dealing with problems. So then if you've got a discontent on the Tillium refinery ship, well, whatever. We're currently dealing with a water shortage or whatever. We'll deal with that later. Hand of God was Series 1, but the first example and a good one. Episode starts with the fleet is suddenly out of fuel and ends with we have enough fuel to last the entire fleet for many decades. Yeah, what you could do with there really is that, because of course the ends with because of the Tillium, right? They found all the Tillium. But Yeah, you could have done with that being broken down, like increasing like worry about fuel shortages. Some stuff they actually do that with as well. Like there are things where it becomes a mounting problem, and then there's an episode where they have to deal with it. But like you say, very often it has to be like the problem of the week. That's actually reflected really well in the what do you call it? The game, the board game. That's what you call it, the board game. The BSG board game, which is pretty fun. And that is every player turn you draw a crisis, and you all have to work together to deal with the crisis. To make for an interesting resource management video game, yeah, absolutely be right. That would actually be really fun. Because whenever they've made video games of it, it's always focused on like fighting the Cylons. But yeah, absolutely have it where you have your little fleet and you've got to like manage resources and juggle things and make the decisions. Kind of make it a bit of Frostpunk in space, right? You've got these serious decisions you have to make, these problems you have to overcome, and what are you willing to do to overcome them? Are you willing to do some terrible things? And yeah, the board game, you draw every player turn, you draw a crisis, and then you have to like resolve that crisis between you by putting in cards of the appropriate colour. You all put a card in face down, they get shuffled, and then you have a look and count them, and if you've got enough of that colour, you pass the crisis. Otherwise, some bad things happen. However, one or more players are secretly a Cylon, so they can put in a card of the wrong colour, and that counts against what you've put in. And then the cards are worth different amounts and stuff. I can't remember exactly. So you can put in those cards that are like maybe cancelling everybody out, but you don't want to make it obvious. So you can have people plotting against each other, stuff going wrong, and that works really well. Unless, of course, your person who owns the game hasn't shuffled the cards properly, and so you just get nothing but water shortages for about half the game. And then for the other half of the game, draw nothing but Cylon attacks. We ran out of Cylon attack counters. We had so many Cylon attacks in the second half of the game that we actually ran out of the Cylon attack pieces. Oh, and also it turned out that on account of him not shuffling the cards properly, rather than a couple of you are secretly Cylons, it turned out we were all Cylons. We just didn't all know it yet, which is just fantastic. Like, everybody is a Cylon. What a twist. What a twist to BSG. There aren't any Cylon infiltrators because we're all Cylons. What a turn that card game had. That's the thing. I want them to sow these problems in advance. If they'd mentioned problems on the refinery during the water episode, it would have made the refinery episode more impactful. Yes. Like I say, they drop hints occasionally, but they could do much better at like building that stuff up. Scar, I think, is also a good illustrating episode. They did manage to do a great job of building up the "we are running out of Vipers" situation, but then when we reach a critical point, they're able to very anticlimactically assemble 2 entire new squadrons of Vipers over the course of a single episode. I think Galactica now has more Vipers than it started with, and they're a newer, better model. I think I remember that Viper thing. Yeah, I will add that the newer Vipers actually don't perform as well without the CRN, but it doesn't really matter for series purposes. Whatever they call the computer program they can't use anymore. I think he's mentioned at one point that they don't perform as well as the old ones without it. But yeah, absolutely. They're able to get more, and it... Yeah. Like, I know they give a reason why, but still. It ruins that kind of like tension of it. Plus, we're told that Scar itself is this terrifying force that has stalked them for ages, but is never mentioned before or after that episode, and doesn't kill anybody who appears before they die. Yeah, and again, that's your curse of telly, isn't it? Like you say, it suffers from the telly format. What you want to do is what they do in Fast and the Furious: introduce a character whose job is to like be killed off in that film, but then have them be hugely popular, so you have to come up with a way to like bring them back. So you change the chronology of the films, even though it doesn't really make sense. And then you have to kind of deal with it, the problems that arise from that. Scar could have been really interesting and cool. I was super into that veteran raider concept, but they did nothing with it. I'll not spoil anything for you. The idea kind of is repeated a bit later, but yeah, nothing really comes of it in the short term. Scar is that one Cylon fighter pilot mind brain that keeps getting reincarnated, right? Yeah, it's the fact that raiders download their consciousness when they're destroyed because they're alive. So they Scar's a veteran because they keep getting destroyed, but they keep coming back, as raiders do. Part of the problem they've got as well is that thing if like the raiders are always in huge numbers, because that makes sense. So it's more difficult to do a like cool veteran raider idea when you've also got to deploy them in huge numbers, because they're really cool and veteran and dangerous. But there's also tons of them. That's just going to get you completely overwhelmed. So yeah, I understand there's different things clashing there. They've started properly now. Right, thanks, B-Rat. I'll finish up and then we'll raid over. I'll just finish up this paint I'm using and then we'll raid over. Thank you, B-Rat. I'll see you there because I know you'll be modding over there. Also, Starbuck and Cat get their faces that close together while screaming pure hate at each other and they don't kiss. Worst episode in the series, too many problems. Yes. I completely agree, actually. And again, I think it's one of those things where BSG was sort of ahead of its time in a lot of ways. But it's now been overtaken by events. So there's things that they sort of imply or whatever in some episodes there that would perhaps show more, do differently now. It's a shame, really. But then again, many of those things wouldn't have been done without BSG, so there we are. It's a bit like the joke I saw someone make about the Drakari Witches. Do you remember I painted some of them on stream? That when they were released, they were in fairly they look like they were in fighting gear that were a bit futuristic. But it looks a bit like sportswear. And now that people much more openly wear that kind of clothing to the gym, they just sort of look like they're in mundane sportswear because they've been overtaken by events. It's a little bit like that. To use an odd example. I do still really like it though, BSG. I absolutely love it. I think it's probably my favourite series I've ever watched. Like we can identify and talk about problems. I think overall it's still my favourite. I can't think of any other telly series that's been as good as that. Like as good as The Expanse was, I don't think it's as well put together. The first series of The Expanse, maybe, because that's brilliant. I absolutely love the first series of The Expanse. Like the third and fifth series are the ones that are like, whatever. That's the ones I wasn't bothered about. Again, they're not bad, but they're just not as interesting. Alright, then we're finishing up. So we're going to raid Red Planet. That's a commie show presented by Kira Chat, so you'll know that Amy mentioned a lot. DJ Mule, Conqueror Dread, and Sophie from Mars. And they're discussing about what we're going to do basically after capitalism and how we're going to get there to our new communist future, which is a great thing to look forward to. So that's what we're going to raid into. So let me get everything set up. Alright, let's go. So, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've had fun. It's been nice just doing a little bit of painting. Been quite relaxed today. I've been a little bit low energy, I suppose, but there you are. That's what we do. If you'd care to drop some links in the chat, Loomis, please feel free. Great stream. Thank you, Loomis. I appreciate that. Thank you, Loomis, Beer at Postman, for keeping me company today. That's been very nice. I'll be back on Tuesday around 2000 BST for Minecraft with our own Loomis of Phelan, friend of the channel. I should also add that it's not just previous streams, but it's like Let's Plays as well. I'll edit that command. But it's new. We've got a YouTube command now. Check that out. We've got the Discord if you want to come and join in there. And then the raid message, if you will, Loomis, and we'll get ready more raid over Red Planet. So yeah, I'll be back on Tuesday for Minecraft 2000 BST, and I'll be back a week today for more painting at around 1800 BST. Nominally, I'm always late. New, I know. Look at these new commands. Look at these new commands, everybody. Let me copy that raid message me sent. Copy paste. There we go. There's like no countdown, no lag on that in case you want to do it more than once. There we go. Let's get that ready. We're going to raid over. Let me get my send set up. So yeah, we'll hit on the end stream as it times down, and then we'll go over. That's as is my want. You know that bit, don't you? That's what I do. Look at that bits of paint I've spilt on there. Ridiculous. All right. There we go. All right. Come on, who's joining me? Don't make me look like a punk. Come on, join the raid. Don't make me look like a punk. See you next time. All right. Yeah, we'll go to the end stream. Then we'll raid over. Please join me there. Yeah, I hope to see you all soon. Until then, take care and namaste.